into another spring edition of the Pittsburgh Sports Now Football Pulse as the Pitt Panthers completed their 5th practice of the spring window. One more away from the halfway point as they will take to Acrisure Stadium on Saturday for their first spring scrimmage of the year. I'm Nathan Brysinger and welcome in. Be sure to check out all of our content over on PittsburghSportsNow.com. Had the sights and sounds today focused on the defensive backs, which we will talk about later in the show, and some of the observations I'm seeing from that unit, including the corners and the safeties, along with some injury news on that front within that unit, along with some thoughts on Pat Narduzzi, some of the things he said today. He spoke. Running back Desmond Reed, defensive end Jimmy Scott, and linebacker Braylon Lovelace also all spoke. So that can be seen on our YouTube page over at Pittsburgh Sports Now. But we're going to start off talking about 5th spring practice. It's their 3rd padded practice of spring camp. So things are starting to heat up. Things are starting to progress a little bit. Now we're getting to the halfway point, but Pitt will get a chance finally to have its first spring scrimmage where they will be live the entire time. And a thing that Pat Narduzzi said today, which was interesting, is they have only participated in 18 live snaps throughout their first 5 practice sessions, which he feels is a lot less than where they usually are, but a lot to do with trying to keep guys healthy, sort of infusing some of the new guys in there, transfers, freshmen, along those lines. And things will really start to get going once this scrimmage gets underway, and then moving into the 2nd or the 3rd and 4th week of spring camp. I mean, we're about halfway through. We'll have, content from next week and the week after, and then it's a spring game. April 12th, Saturday, April 12th at Acrisure Stadium with a 1 o'clock start time is the spring game. So that is coming up pretty quickly here as Pitt continues to work. Again, practice number 3 and pads. They moved indoors today to deal with a little bit of the rain that came down on the south side. So got a little bit more of an up-close look at things, whereas, we're on the outdoor practice facility. They're usually using 2 fields. There's a lot to take in, but 1 field in the indoor facility got a little bit of a closer look. One of the guys we haven't seen a ton through spring camp so far has been punter Caleb Junko. Got to see him kick a little bit today, and, he has a big role coming up this year. Obviously, as the punter, he 2 years ago struggled a bit. There was a lot of complaints with his game and how inconsistent he was. Last year in 2024, it improved. He was netting about 43.7 yards per punt, better, up from 42.3 in 2023. Not great. Of course, he would like it a lot better. I'm sure we'll speak to him here soon in spring camp or once fall camp opens. I know we talked to him last year before the season and felt he was in a much better place than 2023. And he's a former walk-on, but he's going to be the guy punting. He was hitting the ceiling in the indoor facility today, so he was looking good. I expect another step improvement and more progress from him as you enter 2025. So I think he's in a good spot. We got to see him boom some kicks. He had some good hang time on a lot of his kicks, trying to get up towards 6 seconds of hang time per kick, and also his directional, kicking was looking better, getting it to spots where he wanted it to. So that would be interesting to follow along how Caleb Junko is doing. I know a lot of people were very interested and very critical of him at times, and there's been times where he is, especially in 2023, where he did not kick well, where he shanked a lot of punts. Didn't do that a ton in 2024. There was a few that were like, wow, that was not good, but for a while he was on a good streak where he was booting them pretty well. So he'll be a guy that we're definitely going to have to follow along. Something we haven't talked a ton about is special teams within kicking, and we haven't seen a ton of James London, the Murray State transfer kicker who is looking to take over the starting job for Ben Sauls, and also returning kicker Sam Carpenter, who's also looking to try to take over that job. So that battle will be interesting. Seems like James London was kind of the preemptive guy to win that job. So we'll see, how things play out there, but we haven't seen them a ton. We heard from Pat Narduzzi last Thursday talk about James London, where it was his first day kicking. Things weren't all that good, but we haven't had a chance to really watch them too much. They're resodding the practice, part of the practice and grass fields at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex where they typically kick, where the Steelers usually practice. So we haven't seen a ton of them so far in spring, but got to see Junko kick, looking pretty good. So we'll see how things progress on his part. But he's a redshirt senior year this year. There's going to be a lot to be asked from him, especially to keep improving his game and be a huge part of that special teams unit that, all three phases so important for this Pitt football team. Jacob Bernowski, very good special teams coach. I think he's an excellent coach, very energetic. Seems like he gets a lot of his guys, especially the tight ends as well. So see what they can get out of Caleb Junko here for one final year in 2025. But Pat Narduzzi, again, he talked about the live plays, the live periods have only had 18 plays, and that the spring scrimmage coming up will be a really good point and gauge for this team to see where they are halfway through spring. He said, in quote, this is going to set the bar for where they are right now. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out, what the word is coming out. It's a closed scrimmage, so we will not be able to see it. But I'm sure, Pat Narduzzi will talk about it next Tuesday about some of the takeaways within the scrimmage. And I think two to three areas where I'm very interested in looking at from this spring scrimmage to hear about is both line play, offensive line and defensive line, especially the offensive line, because that was one of the biggest storylines coming in to spring this year is how can Jeff Percy and how can Kendall Stanley come in here and play at tackle position? Can Ryan Baer solidify himself at the right tackle position? Keith Gavea, how can he do at left guard coming in from Richmond? Lyndon Cooper and BJ Williams seems like they're going to be starting again, center and right guard, respectively. But how about some of the depth pieces? Pat Narduzzi hinted at a couple today. He talked about, he wants to see more guys like what's the progress on Isaiah Montgomery and Ryan Coretta and Jackson Brown and some of those guys that are going to be on that two deep, because the left tackle seems like it's Piercy and Stanley, and on the left side, left tackle. So those are two guys that have a lot of starting experience, but who can fill in behind the rest of the line? There's a ton of options, not a ton of experience. Isaiah Montgomery had a few starts last year. Jackson Brown got a little bit involved. And Ryan Coretta was a guy last year, talked about a lot during fall camp, maybe as a riser. So we'll see. And Terrence Enos, of course, as well, is another guy that got some playing time last year. But how can he continue to grow and progress through this spring camp? So we're going to hear a lot about that, I'm sure, coming out of the spring practice or spring scrimmage from Saturday. And then also the defensive line, the defensive ends specifically. Can Nate Temple get back to where he was before he was injured and be a potential playmaker on defense and be a productive member of that defensive end unit? He's going to be a leader this year, entering his 7th season. How about Blaine Spires, the Utah State transfer? What can he do? Seen him just a little bit, watched the D-line a couple days ago. He looks big. He looks athletic. So does Joey Zielinski, coming from Eastern Michigan. A younger guy in there, Oregon transfer. Jaden Moore, Maverick Gracio, got some praise from Pat Narduzzi. Where are those guys through the first 2 weeks? And right now, where they just have had only 3 days of padded practice, having had a lot of takeaways, a lot of observations from Narduzzi, hasn't seen a ton of what he can really share just because they haven't had a ton of opportunity to work on things. So it'll be live. It'll be live on Saturday, and there will be plenty to watch, plenty of tape to watch. And we're going to start to get sort of feeling out process. Next week's a huge week in terms of where things sort of stand and progress, because then you have 2 more days of spring practice. You have your second spring scrimmage on April 5th, and then you're left to 1 more week of practice, and then everyone gets to see what's going on April 12th when things are on TV, are open to the media, are open to the fans, and seeing where is this team in 2025? Is this going to be a team where a lot of these players are talking about, that was a fluke, a 6-game losing streak. That's not going to happen. We're not going to let that happen again. Obviously, we still got a long offseason ahead, but where is this team? Is this team going to be exciting again? Where is this offense? They're going to bring in even more plays that they've been talking about, and that's been another huge story. We put out a story this morning about Eli Holstein and Jake Overman both saying that this offense is light years ahead of where they were last year. And even Holstein said from midway through the 2024 season. That's some big words. That's a big thing to talk about right there, and huge for this Pitt team. If that's the case, if that's really what's going on, and not just a coincidence that they're saying that, and maybe that's what they're thinking. But if that's the case, that this offense is really adding some really good stuff. They're all on the same page. The communication is good. The comfortability is good, even with these new guys. Pitt could be in a really good spot. They showed improvement through the first 7 games last year compared to 2023, of course. And then they struggled down the stretch. Obviously, you have the injuries with Holstein and Yarnell in the offensive line, and Desmond Reed missed a couple games, or a little bit here and there. But is this offense able to take another huge step in K-Bell in year 2 is a big thing that we will be asking about, of course, coming out of the first scrimmage. How did they perform against the defense? Can the defense stand up against them? How are they going to fare against them? The linebacker unit, how are they going to do? Are they going to be another super productive unit this year? A lot to talk about coming out of this upcoming spring scrimmage. Now, a couple of other notes. Talk quickly about takeaway stickers. Been tracking that a little bit throughout today, was looking at that. And on the defensive side, who's making splash plays? It's always a big, fun thing to look at during spring and fall camp. 3 guys have had 2 takeaways so far. Kyle Lewis, not surprising, had 4 interceptions and a fumble recovery last season. Cruz Brookins, another guy, he was the talk of fall camp last year, had a bunch of takeaway stickers across his gold helmet. And then along with freshman Sean Lee, the cornerback, has 2 takeaway stickers. So that's a good sign for him stepping into this program and making some plays, trying to break out of his shell a little bit early on as an early enrollee freshman. A couple other guys that have 1 takeaway sticker. Nick Lappy, the linebacker, has 1. Javon McIntyre with 1 as well. And Davion Pritchard, a cornerback, has another takeaway sticker. So those are the guys that have forced turnovers and have made plays defensively. There's some other guys that we'll get into here in the secondary that look good, that have been talked about making some plays. We've seen clips of them a little bit as well, making plays. So we'll get into that in a second here. But before moving on to that, talking about getting into the secondary, Pat Narduzzi shared a little bit of injury news regarding one of the cornerbacks, one of the starting cornerbacks, which is intriguing news at that. Rashad Battle, he said, is most likely not going to go in this spring camp. Most likely going to sit out with, seems like there's an injury. He missed the Virginia game in 2024 and also the bowl game against Toledo to end of the year with an injury. He made 10 starts on the year, and he's the projected starter alongside Tamon Lynham. So it'll be interesting to hear what his progress is with that injury. He's been noticeably absent. It's been something we've been monitoring, and we're not really allowed to talk about injuries unless it is brought up and officially talked about by Pat Narduzzi, and it was today. So Rashad Battle's expected to be a starter this year for Pitt at corner. He 10 games, but he has dealt with his fair share of injuries over the years here at Pitt. He did not play in 2023 at all. He missed a good stretch to end the season in 2022, earning a medical red shirt. So it's just been part of Rashad Battle's story here at Pitt, being hit with the injury bug. So we'll see what his health status is like once spring camp comes to an end, going into the summer. That's really one of the only main noticeable guys that has not been at camp. Pretty much everyone else has been there. Some other guys have been working off to the side. Jaden Bonsu, Poppy Williams working off to the side. Denham Cook has been every once in a while. Josh Altman. So those are a couple guys that are there at practice, but working off to the side. Seems like they're working on some things, getting back to maybe full status at that. But let's get into the secondary. That was the positional unit I watched today. Monitor them pretty closely and got to look at some of the guys that we're always hearing about, but some of the guys that maybe not talked about a ton. Now let's start at the outside, at the cornerback position. Tamon Lynham is the guy expected to start. He started 3 games last year for Pitt. So he's not like a full-time returning starter. Usually that's about 6 games or 7 games. You play 6 or 7 games to be listed as a returning starter. But Lynam, I really like his game. I really like what I saw from him in 2024 to transfer him from Nebraska. Thought he played pretty well. I thought his coverage skills were pretty good. He's a lengthier guy. He stands at 6'2". He's 190 pounds. He's a 6th-year guy. He has the veteran experience. And Pitt, they put guys into the league that have that type of length. Makes me think of Jason Pinnock at corner, a little bit of Damari Mathis, Dane Jackson, a lot of those guys. Lynam's right there. He's another guy just like that. Watched him do a couple reps, working on press coverage. His footwork looks good. He's in sync with everything. Now they were going half speed on some of these drills, but his footwork's really good. His technique looks really strong right now. So he is a guy that I'm high on. I think he could be really, really strong at the cornerback position for Pitt alongside Battle. Now, the big thing for the corners last year, and especially just the secondary in general, was missed tackles. The big one was Donovan McMillan couldn't bring down Cade Klubnik in that Clemson game, allowing that big run that basically sealed that game for the Tigers in a heartbreaking fashion because Pitt could have easily won that game. But you also think about the SMU game and the Louisville game. There were a lot of missed tackles in that one between Battle and Lynam and in this secondary. So that is something they're going to have to clean up. They work on it at practice, do some hitting drills, some physical drills. But Lynam, I just think, he's got long arms. He's got nice length to him. Another guy like that, younger guy, Shadarian Harrison for Pitt. He's a redshirt sophomore. He's 6'1", but he's got long arms. He's a skinnier build. But he's a guy that's going to be on the 2 deep, at least projected on the 2 deep. He finished it on there last year. He's a guy to watch for. I think he's done some nice things so far through spring. He's going to be a guy that could be an impact guy at the cornerback position because they're going to need to fill in that depth. Pitt lost a handful of guys to the portal from the cornerback position, most notably Rylan Gandy went on to Indiana. Now, the other guys that left from that position, not very noteworthy to that extent. No Bigelow and some other guys, but no one that really played a ton. So these younger guys that now can step up and take these opportunities, I think Shadarian Harrison is one of those guys that can do that. Along with that is Rashawn Murray. He was an All-American at the D2 level a year ago with California University of Pennsylvania. He's a Pittsburgh kid. It seems like he's really enjoying being able to play here at Pitt. He posts about it. He talked about it when I spoke to him in the recruiting process in the portal that he really wanted to play for Pittsburgh. And he's stepped in and he's made some plays for Pitt so far in spring camp. Doesn't have a takeaway, but there was a clip that came out, a really nice pass breakup from him. He's got some speed to him. I think he can be another speedy, physical defensive back for this Pitt team. He's more of a guy that I would expect to step in and be a third guy in the cornerback rotation where you're looking at Lynam, Battle, Murray over Harrison, just because Harrison's a little bit younger, and I think Murray can step in and do some really good things. He's a senior, so also a veteran guy standing at 6'2". So right along there with Tamon Lynam, where there's both 6'2" corners. You really like that length. As long as he can keep up, the speed, the footwork, he can be an all-around really good package there at corner for Pitt. Now, the rest of the things shaking out at corner, Davion Pritchard, Nigel Maynard, both much younger guys for this Pitt team. Pritchard, a redshirt freshman, Maynard, a redshirt freshman. So those are guys that I would not expect really to work their way up. I think we sort of figured out who your top 4 corners are, get Rashad Battle back, and they're in a good spot there at the cornerback position. Now, it's got to translate to the field. Again, we talked about the missed tackles, couple missed coverages downfields at times. Rashad Battle especially, I think, struggled at times last year with that. But at times, I also thought he was really good. So he had a big, huge pass breakup in the backyard brawl late in that game that forced a field goal instead of a touchdown. So I think he's had some really good flashes, and he's a super veteran guy. So once he's back healthy, I think the 2 veteran guys in Battle, Lynam, and then you got Murray as a senior could be really good for this Pitt team. But again, that's just all potential right now. We're all talking on potential. But the last guy at the corner position, we talked about him with the takeaway stickers, Sean Lee Jr. He's made some plays early on. he's a little bit undersized. So it's going to be interesting to watch his development over the next couple of months and a year. Of course, he's probably not going to play. He'll probably preserve a red shirt here, but he's 5'10". He's a little bit undersized. He stands at 185 pounds. He's a PA guy. Had to transfer to Milford Academy for his senior season because he ran out of eligibility in the PIAA at Harrisburg High School. But he's been making some plays. He's been a little bit noticeable out there. But again, watching him walk through some drills, a little bit slower. Technique is still off a little bit. Heard Archie Collins, trying to coach him up, talk about, working on his coverage skills there. So long way to go for Sean Lee. But the cornerback position, top 4 guys, very interesting. Think it could be a rather sound unit. It's not going to be the strength of this defense at all. But moving inside to the safety position, Javon McIntyre is the leader on this secondary unit. He looks the part. He's out there leading guys, coaching guys up, helping, watching them. Saw Tim Dallas. They were going through some different drills, going to different parts of the field. Saw Tim Dallas telling Javon, hey, coach that guy up. Coach up Josh Guerriere. Coach up Sean Lee. Tell them to keep their head up during drills. So Javon McIntyre is that leader this year, and he looks to improve from last year, much like Rashad Battle. I mean, I think those two are pretty comparable in terms of they had some inconsistent play last year at times. I think McIntyre took a little bit of a dip, actually, from where he was in 23. Thought he had a pretty reasonable season in 2023. Now, just overall coverage and tackling-wise, I think McIntyre has to get a little bit better in that, and we'll see how he does there. Now, the guy that I often gravitate to, and I think just about everyone does because he's such a unique story, he's a local kid, Steel Valley product, is Cruz Brookins. I mean, he was the talk of fall camp last year, but when I was watching the defensive back unit, immediately my eyes just constantly went to Cruz Brookins. He's big. He's got the size. He seems like he's got the physical edge to him now. I mean, he stands currently at 6'2", 200 pounds. He's a redshirt sophomore now. He's going to take over that boundary safety position for where Donovan McMillan was starting last year. And I think he's going to take it and run with it. I think he could be really good in this defense. And we're talking like, DeMar Hamlin and Paris Ford with that type of physicality he can bring. And Donovan McMillan, 2 consecutive years of 100-plus tackles. That could easily be Brookins, just sliding right into that role. Be a guy that is all around the field defensively, making tackles, making plays for this Pitt defense. So I'm very intrigued in him. I think he's done a really good job through spring camp so far. And I know the coaches have been high on him. His teammates have constantly talked about him, especially Javon McIntyre. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting, just as with the cornerback, is the depth. There's a lot of questions with the depth. Jesse Anderson, he was talked about as a guy last camp. He's a redshirt sophomore. He should be on the 2 deep projected right now, depending on, not exactly sure where he'll line up, if it's the field or the boundary exactly yet. As for the rest of the safety guys, still trying to see that through where those guys will line up. Anderson, I think he's a sideline-to-sideline guy. I watched some tape of him a little bit last year and some of the games that he did enter into, and he's got some speed. When things are going towards, the boundary, he can get there quickly from where he's lined up. And I think that could be a bonus for this Pitt defense, especially if they want to use him in the Delta package where they bring in an extra defensive back. I think he could be a good part in there, which is what Brookins did last year, was a big piece of that Delta package. Now, another guy that I'm interested to see his progression because I'm not, I was a little, don't know how to say it, but I just was not super impressed with Kyvir Baines, the UC Davis transfer. He's a super veteran guy. Now, watched him for maybe all of 4 or 5 minutes, but he's undersized. Reminds me a little bit Josh McCarty, who played primarily on special teams last year. But Baines, 5'10", 175 pounds, but he has a lot of veteran experience. He played a ton at UC Davis, making the transition over here from the West Coast to Pittsburgh. And it just hasn't translated just yet. Obviously, we're just 2 weeks into spring camp, so there's a long way to go. But that's a guy that when I watch that secondary, when I watch that safety unit, I'm going to keep an eye on him just to see how things are progressing, because I wasn't super duper impressed on his game so far, but albeit a long way to go for him. Now, two other guys, Allen Bryant's been working off to the side, has not been working out with the safety unit. Have to think he's working back from some sort of injury or just working on his own with the trainers. He's a guy that should slot into that safety unit, projected in the safety, but not sure if he'll crack anywhere towards, any sort of playing time as a redshirt freshman. And then Josh Guerriere is a true freshman, early enrollee. He's done some good things. Pat Narduzzi mentioned the first practice he made a big play. Right out of the gates, he looked strong. He's not the biggest of guys either. He stands at 5'10", 175 pounds. So he's a smaller guy as well. But if your playmaking ability can make up for the lack of size, same with Kavir Baines. If that's the case, then obviously you can be a bonus to this defense. So Guerriere and Baines, smaller guys for this Pitt safety unit. Guerriere, again, is probably going to preserve his red shirt unless they feel they need him. If Allen Bryant is maybe injured and they need someone to step in, who knows? But Guerriere is a young guy. He's a young freshman. Has a long way to go. Same with Sean Lee. But a lot of promise, a lot of upside for those guys. I'm pretty excited to see how those guys work throughout spring camp, going into fall camp, and everything with that as well. And again, Cole Woodson will come in at the safety position as well during fall camp, another 2025 player in that class. But that's a quick look, some of the observations from the secondary from spring practice number 5. Next week and the week after, these final 2 weeks, I'm moving on to the offensive side of the ball. Take a look at some of those units. Offensive line, where is that at? Who's taking the primary snaps at left tackle, Piercy or Kendall Stanley? Who is the depth guys behind pretty much the rest of the offensive line? So we'll see how all of that is unfolding on the offensive line. That'll be next week, along with we'll take a look at the receiving options mixed in with the tight ends. Who's Holstein going to be passing to? Who are those guys that he's going to be targeting all year long? Running backs and quarterbacks, those are going to be much more focalized. There's only 4 guys in each unit. So that'll be a fun one to dissect, because going to get a really good look, a lot of reps from each of those guys, just because of the number game right now with both of those units. But that'll do it for this edition of the Pittsburgh Sports Now Football Pulse. As always, be sure to check out all of our content over at PittsburghSportsNow.com as we continue through spring practice with the upcoming spring scrimmage this coming Saturday at Acrisure Stadium.